coffee cup was already cold when he realized she hadn't touched hers either. The street cafe buzzed around them, forks clinking, cars whispering past, laughter floating by like it belonged to another world. And right there, under the striped awning, a single sentence from her changed the air between them forever. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how old are you? And let me ask you something that might stick with you until the end of this story. If a stranger sat across from you, looked you in the eyes, and quietly offered you a chance to change your entire life, would you believe them or walk away? Her name was Clara Monroe, and she chose that cafe because it didn't look like anything special. No chandeliers, no reservations, no place where money announced itself before a person did. Just chipped tables, sun-faded menus, and a crowd that didn't stare too long. Thomas Reed liked it for the same reason. At 68, recently retired in a way that felt more like being pushed out than choosing rest, he came here most mornings to sit with a notebook he never wrote in and a life he wasn't sure how to restart. When Clara sat down across from him, he assumed she was just another tourist asking if the seat was taken. You could see the hesitation in his hands when he nodded. Years of fixing other people's problems had left him slow to accept anything unexpected. She thanked him, ordered tea, and smiled in a way that felt practiced, but tired, like someone who'd smiled through too many misunderstandings. The first few minutes were small talk, the kind you've had 100 times. Weather, coffee, how busy the street had gotten lately. But then she asked him a question that didn't belong to strangers. She asked if he was happy with how his life turned out. If you were sitting there, what would you say? Thomas laughed it off at first, but something about her calm made it harder to hide. He admitted the truth in pieces. His wife had passed years ago. His children lived far away, busy lives, quick calls. His work had ended without ceremony. He felt useful once, needed. Now he felt invisible. Clara listened without interrupting, like she wasn't just hearing words but weighing them. She told him she'd been on many dates like this, though she didn't use that word. Meetings, conversations, experiments almost. Men who talked about themselves too loudly or asked questions that felt like interviews for benefits they hadn't earned yet. She said she was looking for a senior man with patience, humility, and a steady heart. Not someone chasing comfort, but someone ready to give it. Thomas raised an eyebrow, half amused, half wary. He joked that she was shopping in the wrong aisle. That's when she said something that made his chest tighten. She told him money had complicated her life in ways most people never imagine, that it had made love loud and trust fragile. She didn't say how much, she didn't say how, just that she was wealthy enough to hide it on purpose, and that this cafe was a test, whether she meant it or not. Now pause for a second. If someone told you that across a small cafe table, would you believe them? Thomas didn't. Not fully. He assumed exaggeration, maybe a lonely woman spinning a story to feel interesting. But there was no performance in her voice, no thrill, just caution. She said she wanted to know who someone was before they knew what she had. Their conversation stretched longer than either expected. The morning crowd thinned. Lunch replaced breakfast. Thomas forgot to check the time, something he hadn't done in years. He talked about his late wife, about promises he'd kept even after she was gone. Clara spoke about traveling alone, about the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted something from you. Not you, just access. She asked him what he would do if his life suddenly shifted. Not one the lottery shifted, but purpose returned, connection restored, mornings mattered, again shifted. Thomas didn't answer right away. His mind went to fears first. Embarrassment, being wrong, being used. He admitted he didn't trust hope anymore. It had disappointed him too many times. Clara nodded, almost relieved. She said that was exactly why she was sitting there. She didn't want a man dazzled by possibility. She wanted one grounded enough to be careful with it. When she reached into her bag and slid her phone across the table, his heart stuttered. On the screen was a missed call list, names he recognized from headlines, companies he'd seen on the news. She didn't explain. She just asked him to hold the phone. His fingers trembled as he did. The world felt suddenly louder, brighter, unreal. He looked up, ready to laugh it off, ready to accuse her of playing a cruel joke. Instead, she stood, told him she had to leave, and said she'd return tomorrow at the same time. One condition. He had to decide whether he'd come back too, knowing this might not be a story anymore, but the beginning of something that could change everything he thought he knew about love, age, and worth. She walked away before he could respond, leaving the phone, the cold coffee, and a choice that made his chest ache. He stared at the empty chair across from him, wondering if he'd just met a lonely woman with a story, or a billionaire who had unknowingly placed his entire life on the edge of a single decision. Thomas sat there long after she disappeared into the crowd, the chair across from him feeling louder than any argument he'd ever been in. The phone lay on the table like it might ring on its own and explain everything. He didn't touch it again. Instead, he paid the bill, walked home slower than usual, and spent the night staring at a ceiling that suddenly felt too low for the thoughts rushing through his head. If you were him, would you show up the next day, risking disappointment, or protect your pride and stay away? Morning came without answers, just a familiar ache in his knees and an unfamiliar urgency in his chest. He told himself he'd only stop by the cafe for closure, maybe to prove to himself that he hadn't imagined the whole thing. When he turned the corner and saw her already seated, the same calm posture, the same quiet smile, something inside him steadied. Clara looked relieved, too, like she'd been holding her breath all night. She didn't start with money. She didn't explain anything yet. She asked how he slept. He told her the truth. Not well. She said that was fair. Then she asked if he still wanted to walk away. Thomas surprised himself by shaking his head. He admitted he didn't know what to believe, but he knew how he'd felt talking to her. Present, seen. That mattered more than certainty. That's when she told him everything, not with numbers at first, but with weight. She spoke about inheriting a fortune early, about learning too fast that generosity attracts entitlement, not gratitude, about dates that ended the moment she refused to pay for something, or worse, the moment she did. She explained why she searched for love in ordinary places, under no names, no assistance, no expectations. The cafe wasn't romantic to her. It was safe. When she finally mentioned the scale of her wealth, Thomas went quiet. Not impressed, not excited, afraid. He confessed his fear of becoming a project, a charity case, dressed up as romance. Clara didn't flinch. She told him she wasn't offering rescue. She was offering partnership. She didn't want to change his life for him. She wanted to see if he'd want to change it with her. They began meeting regularly, always somewhere simple. A park bench, a bookstore, a diner with cracked vinyl seats. Clara paid attention to how he treated waitstaff, how he spoke about his children, how he reacted when plans changed. Thomas paid attention to how she handled inconvenience, how she listened more than she spoke, how she never used money to end a conversation. Weeks passed, and something quiet grew between them. Not fireworks. Trust. Then came the moment Thomas hadn't prepared for. Clara invited him to dinner at her home. Not an apartment, not a condo, a property that made his breath catch the moment the gates opened. He almost turned around. He told her he didn't belong there. She told him belonging wasn't about background. It was about intention. Inside, the house felt less like a palace and more like a museum of loneliness. Beautiful rooms, untouched corners. Clara admitted she rarely invited anyone inside. Too many people saw walls before they saw her. That night, Thomas said no to something he never thought he would. Clara offered to invest in a small consulting firm in his name, a way for him to feel useful again. He declined, gently but firmly. He said he didn't want to earn his worth through her resources. He wanted to choose purpose on his own terms. Clara didn't argue. She smiled, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes soften completely. The real test came when her identity leaked. A photo of them surfaced online. Headlines twisted the story into something ugly and predictable. Gold digger, toy boy, crisis romance. Thomas's phone filled with messages, some concerned, some cruel. His children called, worried he'd lost his judgment. Clara watched him closely, ready for the moment he'd retreat. Instead, he showed up the next morning with coffee from the cafe where they'd first met. He told her he didn't fall for a bank account. He fell for a woman who listened to him when he felt invisible. He told her he didn't need defending, but he needed honesty. Clara admitted she was scared too, not of scandal, but of being chosen for the wrong reason again. They sat there, older, wiser, bruised, and decided something quietly radical. They would continue, publicly and privately, without hiding and without explaining themselves to anyone who hadn't earned a seat at that table. Over time, Thomas did find new purpose, not funded by Clara, but inspired by her belief in intentional living. He began mentoring young tradesmen, sharing skills he thought retirement had buried. Clara didn't change his life with money. She changed it by reminding him it wasn't over, and he changed hers by loving her without agenda, without urgency, without asking her to be smaller. Years later, they still returned to that street cafe. Same chip tables, same noise, same corner. If you watched them, you wouldn't see a billionaire and a senior man. You'd see two people who chose each other carefully, in a world that rewards shortcuts. And maybe that's the real twist in this story. Not the money, not the age, but the decision to meet life honestly, one quiet table at a time. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that love doesn't expire and purpose doesn't retire, take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments what part stayed with you the most. Subscribe if you want more stories that go deeper than headlines and remind us what really changes a life.